Top 10 most shocking WrestleMania match outcomes. We are into the top 3. There have been some exciting Money in the Bank cash-ins over the years. 2 of them came in 2013 alone. Dolph Ziggler, the night after WrestleMania 29, right? Easily one of the best ones. And Randy Orton at SummerSlam that year. That was part of the whole swerve on Daniel Bryan after he beat John Cena. That was well done. Those 2 and all of the others had one thing in common. They all took place on non-WrestleMania shows. Pay-per-views, Raws, SmackDown, but never WrestleMania. At least 2 men had promised to wait until WrestleMania to cash in. They gave advance warning of their intentions to do so, those being Mr. Kennedy and Daniel Bryan. Kennedy was going to do the Kennedy countdown, but then he got hurt, and so they quickly took the briefcase off of him. He dropped it to Edge. Only it turned out that he wasn't hurt nearly as badly as they had originally thought. So he really didn't have to surrender his briefcase. So sucks to be him. With Bryan, the original plan was for him to cash in at WrestleMania 28. But as I mentioned last week, instead he lost the title on that show in 18 seconds to Sheamus. Enter Seth Rollins. Number 3 in the countdown is Seth Rollins, cashing in his Money in the Bank contract to win the WWE title at WrestleMania 31. A lot can change in a year. At the end of the Royal Rumble match in 2014, the people badly wanted to see Roman Reigns eliminate Batista to win. And they booed when Roman got dumped out. Then the Shield feuded with the Wyatt family. That was just pro wrestling magic. Their first match at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view is one of my favorite WWE matches of the last decade. And the fans were totally into the Shield. Even after the Shield split, they still seemed to dig Roman. Then he went out with a hernia injury. Even after he came back from the hernia, initially, they still cheered for him. But someone else came back from injury around the same time, Daniel Bryan. And he entered himself into the 2015 Royal Rumble match. Well, so did Roman Reigns. And when it became obvious they were grooming Roman for that spot to win the Rumble and go on and wrestle for the championship that Daniel Bryan never really lost, that's where the tide began to turn. You can trace all of the hate back to that period before the Royal Rumble in 2015. Bryan was still very over with the fans. They wanted badly for him to win that Royal Rumble match, especially after not even being in it the year before. And then he entered, and after only a few minutes, he was gone. And that was it. That was the beginning of the end for Roman Reigns and any hope of the fans accepting him on a wide scale. It was the dumbest move they could have possibly made. If they wanted Roman to win, entering Daniel Bryan into the Royal Rumble match was the single worst decision they could have made. All they had to do was delay his return until the night after the Royal Rumble. That's all they had to do. You know, and even that might not have worked, because you might have had people thinking, well, Daniel Bryan's going to be a surprise, and when he wasn't a surprise, they might have booed anyway and been pissed off, but you would have had a fighting chance. Right? The end result may have been the same. They wanted Bryan badly enough, nobody else was going to work in that position. That's just the way it is. But to this day, my mind is still boggled by that decision. To bring him back when they didn't have to. That was their own choice. And when you see what they did with him in the Royal Rumble match, it's like, why? There was no reason. There was no plan. He was in and out. There was no reason for him to... They sabotaged Roman Reigns through no fault of his own. And the reasoning, allegedly, for them eliminating Daniel Bryan as early as they did from the match that year was so that the fans would just get it out of their system in time for Roman Reigns when he came out to win the match. By then they would have gotten all the booing, all the boo birds would have gotten it out of their system. Only they didn't get it out of their system. And really, until he went out with the leukemia diagnosis last year, all these years later, they still hadn't gotten it out of their system. They made a dumb move and they paid the price for it. So now going into WrestleMania, here, WrestleMania 31, the fans were shitting all over Roman Reigns. Not exactly the reaction they were going for. It didn't help that on the go-home episode of Raw, they had Reigns and Lesnar do a tug of war over the title belt. That was the closing scene from Monday Night Raw. Like Roman Reigns is trying to pull the purse away from a purse snatcher. They're fighting over this championship. Two kids on the playground fighting over a ball. And Lesnar, for all the talk of his deal expiring at WrestleMania, which is why a lot of people figure, well, surely he's losing, he went on ESPN a few days before the pay-per-view to announce that he just signed a brand new contract. He was thinking about going to UFC. He decided, you know what? I'm a sports entertainer now. And he signed a nice big fat new deal with WWE. He's going to stick around. That probably gave a lot of people hope that he might actually retain at WrestleMania. Now, the year before, Seth Rollins, he turned on the Shield. He joined the Authority. They helped him win the Money in the Bank briefcase. Kane did, before he feuded with Dean Ambrose for much of the rest of 2014. And then, he was part of one of the greatest matches in Royal Rumble history. Pinned by an F5 from Brock Lesnar, triple threat match with John Cena. You will not find very many matches in WWE better than that one. So while Rollins was occupied at WrestleMania that year with Randy Orton, who had just left the Authority, I don't remember too many people being preoccupied with this idea that Seth Rollins is definitely going to cash in at WrestleMania. What I do remember are some people believing that Paul Heyman might turn on Brock Lesnar and align with Roman Reigns as the new champion and his newest client. This was, of course, more so before Brock signed the new contract to stick around. They thought, well, Brock's leaving. They're going to have Heyman turn on him. He'll go with Roman. Especially after that gushing interview that Heyman gave. Remember that night after the Royal Rumble? They got snowed in. And so the entire episode of Raw was basically interviews from Titan Tower. And Paul Heyman is just lavishing all of this praise on Roman Reigns and talking about, I knew your father and your grandfather or your uncle or whatever, and this great Samoan bloodline. And some people took that to be some foreshadowing maybe of another Heyman turn on Lesnar. And I heard more about that than I did the idea of a Rollins cash-in. Before everybody starts coming at me saying, it wasn't a surprise. Well, really? Because I didn't hear too many people talking about that. And I think the reason is because most people thought this was going to be the coronation for Roman Reigns. He was Vince's chosen one. Blue contact lenses and all. This was still the phase where Vince had him wearing these blue contact lenses that made him look like some kind of cyborg. He was the guy. He was Vince's handpicked guy. Winner of the Royal Rumble against the wishes of the fans. They had Brock Lesnar end The Undertaker's undefeated streak for this so that Roman could slay the beast and become the man. His family sure believed it. Roman's family, his father, Sika, of the Wild Samoans, he was there ringside for the match. He thought his son was winning, and when he didn't, he apparently flipped the fuck out over it. He was so upset, the Observer at the time said he was looking to start a war. He worked himself into a shoot, brother. Rollins himself, he's talked about the cash-in. He says he didn't even know about it until the middle of the show that night. He lost to Randy Orton earlier off that great curb stomp attempt into an RKO finish. When The Rock was out there later on, he had a segment with Stephanie and Triple H. Ronda Rousey was there. While that segment was going on, they came and they got Rollins. They pulled him into a room with Heyman and Lesnar, and they worked out a new finish to the main event. I take it the original finish was going to be Roman winning, which is what the family had expected, but then Vince changed his mind. I knew the title was changing hands before the match even started. As soon as they promoted that the champion was going to fly out to the East Coast to appear on the Today Show the next morning, I knew. Now, I didn't know it was going to be Seth Rollins. I figured it was going to be Roman Reigns. But there was not a chance in hell that Brock Lesnar was catching a red-eye flight to the East Coast to be up at 4 a.m, yucking it up with Matt Lauer and Al Roker. Not a chance. And then immediately flying back to the West Coast to be on Monday Night Raw, which was in San Jose the next night. That's what they had Seth Rollins do. Rollins had to get on a red-eye from California to New York to be on the Today Show, and then fly right back to California for Raw that night. That was a dead giveaway to me that Brock Lesnar was not retaining the championship. The match itself, I thought, was excellent. This is the second Brock Lesnar-Roman Reigns match featured in this countdown here. And the first one sucked, I thought. I just, and it wasn't radically different from the WrestleMania 31 match. So they are very similar matches, but I hated the second one. I love the first one. Part of that is the fact the crowd just didn't completely shit all over this one like they did that one. But part of it also is that this was their first meeting. This was not the rematch. This was not the rematch of the rematch. It was the first meeting, and Lesnar dominated much of it. Reigns, he fought from underneath. He took a lot of abuse. He was the underdog. And when they did it again at WrestleMania 34, we had already seen this song and dance play out before. And nobody likes a sequel that basically just copies the original but isn't as good. Reigns, he bled a gusher in the WrestleMania 34 match, couldn't save the match. Lesnar bled in this one. He went headfirst into the ring post, immediately started bleeding. This was also the first time that Lesnar ever blurted out Suplex City, bitch, thus making himself millions of dollars in merch money. So, it's the end of the match. Both men are down. Rollins' music hits. He sprints down to the ring to cash in. Not only the very first Money in the Bank cash in at WrestleMania history, but the first time anybody in the history of Money in the Bank going all the way back to 2005, 10 years earlier. The first time anybody had ever cashed in mid-match, which goes against all conventional wisdom, right? Why would you cash in during a match when you can just wait until the match is over and the champion is exhausted and it's one-on-one? So now it's a triple threat match. The people in my section in the stadium were losing their shit over this. People loved this finish. Rollins hit Lesnar with a curb stomp, doesn't go for the cover. He's gonna give him one more. He goes to hit it again. Lesnar scoops him up for an F5. Roman comes from out of nowhere, hits a spear on Brock. Rollins falls to his feet, hits a curb stomp on Roman. Curb stomps the shit out of him and wins the title. You can hear Seth Rollins say thank you so much to Roman Reigns right before the referee counts 3. He was so happy. And Rollins makes history. New WWE champion. Even if you didn't think that Rollins cashing in was much of a surprise or a shocking outcome, and a lot of people would disagree with you, I think the real surprise was him cashing in the middle of the match like that. Between that and the fact that Vince didn't plant the crown on the head of the crown prince, I consider this to be a shocking outcome. This was one of the best WrestleMania shows of the last 10 years. This and WrestleMania 30 back to back, and then we had WrestleMania 32. It's like having 2 weeks of nice weather back to back. You just know that you're in for a shitty week with rain and snow and slop and shit. That's what WrestleMania 32 was. Slop and shit. Next night on Raw, we came as close as we've come since Brock came back in 2012. Or any time since. In getting a Brock Lesnar match on Monday Night Raw. He comes out, cuts all over his face, dressed in his gear, ready to go. Ready for his rematch with Seth Rollins. And they teased it. They brought him out. They did the ring introductions and everything. But then Rollins bailed out of the ring and said, I'm not feeling it tonight. Brock chased after him. He caught Rollins in the ring, gave him a German. He landed on his feet. He hit Brock with a kick to the side of the head that just, he flicked him off, basically. Just briefly stunned him. All that did was piss him off even more. Rollins bailed through the crowd. Lesnar laid waste to J&J security. He killed the announcers, flipped the announce desk on top of them. Michael Cole tried to weasel away. Brock grabbed him, gave him an F5. One of his shoes goes flying through the air. Then he beat up a planted cameraman. Stephanie McMahon comes out, sends Brock home on his next long vacation, disguised as a suspension. Rollins and Lesnar did have a match at the Battleground pay-per-view later that summer. Brock totally dominated the match to the tune of 13 German suplexes. But then The Undertaker came out and kicked Brock in the dick. So Rollins got to keep his belt. And here we are, 4 years later. And after that cash-in, and again, Rollins will have the chance to take the title away from Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. This time there is no Money in the Bank. There will be no cash-in. Braun Strowman already blew his cash-in. Now he's in the Battle Royal shooting an angle with the dingbats from SNL. My interest level in this Rollins-Lesnar match coming up is virtually non-existent, which probably bodes well for how I'll view it coming out of WrestleMania since my expectations are so low. And I don't know why they're so low. This is a match that has a story that dates back 4 years. But I don't know, just the way I feel right now. You tell me, am I wrong? How many of you are genuinely excited about this match? Is this the match you're most looking forward to going into WrestleMania? Because it's not for me. It just, among everything going on and the stuff with Kofi and the women and everything else, it just does not feel like a priority right now. But here we are 4 years later, and we're back at it again with Rollins and Lesnar.